It's very easy to get yourself lost or find yourself in distress in the vast mountain ranges of Japan. Last year, a record high number of people went missing in the mountains, and that number was 3,506. About half of them were over 60 years old. What happens to those people who go missing is up for debate in some cases, as well as the stories of the surviving. Keep that in mind as we delve into 8 true, unnerving hiking and camping stories from Japan you haven't heard. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. This happened when I was a junior high school student. Back in those days, we often had barbecues, in the summer, on the hills just behind my parents' house. Now, our family has got a lot of land. We were fortunate enough to inherit this land through generations. On the land, there is a small mountain among many hills. My family and I would often have campouts on this land. I called 2 friends to have a campout with me on the day that this experience took place. There were 3 of us in total. My father had made a little area for us to camp in. He cut down some trees and he made some seats out of them. He made the land flatter so the campout would be a bit better. We'd be in a bit more comfort, you know. The campsite was in the shade of the mountains, so it was nice and cool, even on hot summer days. My family would have meals out there kind of every month or so. It was great. I begged my dad to let me have a campout for so long, where it would just be me and my friends. He was reluctant to say yes at first because we were still quite young and the land was very big and full of all sorts of animals. There was some danger to it. I guess that's why it appealed to me so much. I wanted to have a bonfire, like my dad does, but I wasn't allowed. I managed to convince my dad to let me use a small gas stove for a barbecue set though. So I tasked my friends with bringing some tasty stuff for us to cook up. It was a really great night. It felt like our first steps into maturity when I look back on it. We were under a perfect starry night sky and the whole lay of the land felt like it was ours. But by the time it got really dark out there, we were winding down and chatting. My friends were saying stuff like, "Camping here's the best. I wish we could do it all the time." I was so happy that they had had a great night. We had a little LED lantern. It did attract a lot of bugs, but it was fine. There were so many bugs out. The cicadas were particularly noisy. We got into our tent, and after a while, I guess we all dropped off to sleep. I woke at one point though, and I noticed that the tent was empty. I was really startled by that, to be honest. My first thought was, where the hell are they? And are they alright? I poked my head out of the tent and called out my friends' names. I was really scared that something had happened to them. I heard a shuffle of feet, and I saw one of my friends emerge from behind the shadow of a tree. He was doing his flies up, and he said to me, "I was there, just using the bathroom," and we both laughed. I said, "What about our other friend?" And he replied, "He's using the bathroom too, but just for a number 2. And I told him not to do that anywhere near our campsite or us." "Good move," I replied, with a smile. With that, I turned to go back to my sleeping bag and get some sleep. Before I had the chance to lie down, I heard a scream. It sounded like a slightly distant scream. I looked at my friend who had just gone for a whiz in horror. We rushed towards the sound of the scream, calling out for our friend. Initially there was no reply, but then we heard this intermittent screaming sound, and after a few agonizing seconds we made out some words. Our friend came rushing towards us, screaming about someone trying to kill him. He dived behind a tree or some bushes and pointed behind him. He said something like, "Hide guys, we gotta hide, we have to run, just don't stand there." I was so confused. Was this a prank? Before I had a chance to collect my thoughts, I heard the roar of an adult voice coming barreling towards us. A man burst onto the clearing that my father had created for our family barbecues. The pale moonlight illuminated his huge frame. He was brandishing an axe. I only got a glimpse at the guy, but as soon as we saw the threat, we all ran. I've never ran that fast in my life. I heard that guy's footfall chase us. It was beyond terrifying. What we had at the time was an advantage. We were junior high school kids and we were into sports, so we weren't slow. But goddamned if it happened these days. We were way faster back then. The guy with the axe was shouting, but I couldn't make out a single word that he was saying. It was honestly just a series of noises. Once we couldn't hear the thunder of his footsteps chasing us or his maniacal screams, we slowed to an eventual stop. We hid by some trees for a while. To make sure that there was no sign of him, we stealthily made our way back to my family home and burst in and told my parents about what had just happened. My dad couldn't call the cops quicker. I cannot tell you about what happened after that because I was quite young and still shaken up, but all I know is that they didn't find the guy. The police and my parents presumed that it was some passing vagrant or madman that we were unlucky enough to encounter. They thought that it was a homeless guy who had sort of settled on our land and came after us for our food. The police and my dad confirmed that food and a few other items from our tent had gone missing. Well, as a result, we had tighter measures for trespassers, and all the family barbecues were put off for a while. It was something that really scared me. I never really enjoyed all that land after that. This happened about 20 years ago, but I think about it every now and then. When it happened all those years ago, I was a schoolboy. I had just gotten a camera for my birthday, and I was really into photography. One summer's afternoon, I decided to take myself on a little hike into the mountains. I rode about an hour on my bike to a really remote location. I brought some food along, a couple of rice balls and some sausage thing. I still remember that. Riding up to the mountains, I saw many fields, and there were old people working those fields. I felt as if I could just leave my bike anywhere and not run the risk of it being stolen. I was happy that I chose to come out here. It seemed very peaceful. I left my bike in a shady area and began to head into the woods. I walked for a short while, and then I saw a dog up ahead. The dog had a thick chain around its neck. The dog wasn't looking at me, so I whistled, and then the dog stopped and turned my way. When the dog looked at me, I noticed that it looked a lot like my dog. My dog had died a few years ago. It was a mixed breed. So I spoke to the dog. "Hey buddy, what are you doing out here with this big old chain around your neck?" I removed the chain from his neck, and I split my lunch with the dog. He looked super hungry. I thought that after we ate, he would go his way and I would go mine. But the dog followed me. I turned to the dog and said, "Hey buddy, sorry, that's all the food I have. There's nothing left." And the dog just stared at me. I couldn't help but smile and laugh. The dog just sat there panting and wagging his tail. I patted him on the head and turned to leave, but once again the dog followed me. I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe this ain't so bad. It might be fun to have a little company. "Are you coming with me then, boy?" I asked, and the dog's tail wags told me that the answer was a big yes. So I headed into the mountain with a dog at my heels. The mountains weren't very big. I thought that it would take about 2 hours in total for the round trip. I was climbing the mountain, taking photos of the plants and the views. It was really great. It was at the height of summer, so the cicadas were in full voice. There were numerous insects buzzing and chirping. The birds were singing in the trees too. I passed a pair of older men who were also out for a hike. I said hello, and one of them replied something a little weird. "Oh, you're with the dog, huh?" This happened when I was about 70% into the hike. I had climbed this mountain several times before, and I knew the area kinda well. I loved it there. I came across a dirt road that I hadn't seen before when I was near the bottom of the mountain. Beyond the dirt road was a gravel path that extended around to the left. I couldn't see where it went without walking down it. I thought to myself, what's down there? I couldn't believe that I hadn't seen this place before. I walked down the dirt road closer to the gravel. There was a rusted wire suspended between two white pillars which acted like a kind of barrier. I could see a dilapidated cabin back there. It looked like it had been abandoned. I thought, wow, what a great place to take some photos. So I went to slip under the rusted wire and onto the gravel path, but I stopped when I heard the dog barking like mad behind me. It surprised me, so I turned to face the dog. The dog had its haunches up and was in a kind of defense position. You know the one that dogs do when they bark? Yeah, that one. The look on the dog's face is a look I will never forget. The primal expression of fear and distress. Something had really spooked this dog into a fight or flight situation. I should make it clear that the dog wasn't barking at me. I wasn't scared that the dog was going to lunge at me or anything like that. The dog was barking at something behind me, barking at the road I was about to walk down, and my back went cold when I realized that. And I noticed something. I couldn't hear the sounds of the cicadas or any sounds really down that road. I stared down there, and I felt a cold wind blowing at my back. This is somewhere where I shouldn't go, I thought. So I hurried back to the mountain paths I knew, and the sounds of nature grew, slowly louder. I looked around for my companion, but I couldn't find the dog anywhere. He had disappeared. I looked for the dog while I went down the mountain. I wanted to say goodbye and maybe even thank you, because I'm certain if it wasn't for that dog, my curiosity would have gotten the better of me, and I would have walked off beyond the wire barrier. I wonder what would have happened to me if I did that. Did the dog save me from something? I think that the dog did save me from something. I must have looked around that mountain area for an hour and a half trying to find the dog, but I couldn't find the dog. I was tired and hungry and ready to go home. At that point, I said goodbye to the dog out loud, and I was off. I went back a few times to that mountain area, but I could never find that gravel path or the dog again. It was a very, very weird but nice summer memory for me. This ain't no ghost story. I want to share with you the horrors of the human condition. Second hand from me, though. I heard this on a radio call-in show in the 90s. And before you ask, I don't have a tape of it, unfortunately. So they were interviewing some mountain range search and rescue officer. And he was a really experienced guy, apparently. He was explaining that when you climb mountains like Everest, there are loads of dangers along the way, obviously. There are risks of slips, avalanches, and dropping into crevices. If you fall or slip into one of these deep crevices, it's not good. It's not good at all. I will now attempt to recall what the search and rescue officer said on the live radio call-in show. So from the helicopter we can see people in distress, people who need help or rescue. Stuff like that. The most dangerous thing about our work is that when someone slips into an inaccessible area of the mountain range, there isn't all that much we can do for them. If you think about trying to land a helicopter to aid them, you'll realize that it isn't always as easy as it seems. Well, it might be with modern technology these days, but back when I worked search and rescue, it wasn't possible to land or attempt rescue in certain areas of these mountains. In some certain situations, we search and rescue officers will see hikers or climbers below waving and shaking their arms around, screaming and pleading for us for help. But we cannot do anything to help them. We have to look at them in the deep crevices and think to ourselves, we cannot save you. There is an incredible emotional toll that has on a person. So I'm sorry to say, if you find yourself in that position and a helicopter is circling and you're desperately trying to get the search and rescue team's attention, you might even scream yourself hoarse, trying your best to get us to hear you. We did hear you, or we did see you, but we can't do anything. We can't react, or even show you that we notice that you're there. Because sadly, if you find yourself in those situations, you're already dead. I could even catch eyes with you, but I could only see you as a dead person walking." And with that, the call ended on a sober and frightening note. It sent chills up my spine when I heard that. I went camping with 6 friends last summer. We hired a small campsite in the mountains. It was a really great time, actually. We set off fireworks and we had a barbecue. It was perfect. There is something so peaceful about sitting and watching a roaring bonfire, isn't there? By midnight, everyone was pretty much tuckered out. We decided that it might be time to hit the hay. We all settled in for the night, and I don't know if I was the first to hear it, but I'm confident that we all heard it. There was a low kind of moaning or groaning sound coming from somewhere deep in the woods. If I had to put an age on it, I would say it was middle-aged, and I would say that the owner of that voice was likely a woman. At points I did wonder if it was an animal, but there was something so human-like to that voice, it convinced me that it wasn't an animal. It was clearly human. There was a certain sadness to the quality and tonality of the voice. It was unnerving. It was weird because we were pretty much in the middle of nowhere, and I didn't see other campers in the area that we hired. I remembered gathering firewood thinking, whoa, we're the only ones here. There weren't any houses or cabins nearby, and I didn't know who could be out here making this weird noise in the middle of the night. Anyways, the voice, the moaning and groaning voice, only lasted for about 10 minutes before it just sort of ended. In the morning, my friends and I spoke about what we heard. We later ran into another group around the campsite, and we asked if they heard anything last night. You know, something weird, like a creepy wailing noise, and they said that they had. These guys were older than us, and they looked like this wasn't their first camping trip. When we spoke to them, they confirmed that they were regulars to this particular campsite. We mentioned the screaming, moaning sound we had heard the night before, and they smiled at one another with a knowing glance and told us the following. "From this point on, it's kind of an urban legend. It's up to you how much faith you put in the claims, but since you asked, I guess you want to know. This here used to be a site for kids' camps, you know, summer camps. Ain't been that way for a long time. The reason for that was a disappearance. It happened on an all-girls school summer camping trip. They were learning about forestry and nature. Used to have an awful lot of camping trips around here. Something changed that night, though. It was as if the soil went sour or something. So the teachers were all up in arms because a student went missing. They turned desperate as the minutes crawled by. They found her, though, but this story doesn't have a positive ending. They found her all right, hanging from a tree limb. The rumor was the poor girl was relentlessly bullied. Well, if teachers didn't notice the student was missing for a couple of hours, then I doubt they noticed any kind of bullying. The teacher who found her apparently quit shortly after this. She couldn't cope with the guilt or the shock. During the search, she was the only one who was the most vocal. She was the only one calling out the student's name. She was the only one who couldn't bear the shock of letting the student down. She took the same option her student did. She isn't here anymore, sadly. So we all come to the conclusion that the moaning and groaning sound that some people hear isn't the voice of the student. It's the voice of the guilt-ridden teacher, still searching for her student, bound to this earth by the guilt. Well, we all trembled. It was a really powerful story. I did wonder, though, in my pessimistic way, if it was all a ploy to make noisy young men with fireworks not return to their tranquil campsite sometime later, but That moaning sound was so real and so creepy. But hey, that's summer though, isn't it? What a time that is. There's something special about that season. Needless to say, we didn't go back. I heard this one from an acquaintance. When he was younger, he said that he spent some time in North America. I think he worked there for some kind of extended period. He enjoyed his free time, and he would use every opportunity he could to get out there and explore as much as he could. He's really into hiking and camping, just like I am, so naturally when I heard that he had hiked and camped outside of Japan, I asked him as many questions as I could about his travels. He told me that he saw something unexplainable once, deep in the forest, on one camping adventure. He said that he was with a friend when it happened, and his friend needed to take a leak, so he went into a secluded area, a little away from the campsite. A few moments went by, and his friend wasn't back. He started to get a little concerned, so he and their other friend left the campsite in search of their friend. They had found him, hiding behind a tree. He turned around to them and said, "Shh, look, there's something through the trees over there." They got closer and tried to find what their friend was looking at, and then they saw it. He said it was a big animal. He could see it moving through the gap in the trees. The time of day was dusk, and their surroundings were dimly lit, but there was enough light to see what they saw. Despite the lack of light, they saw a creature that not one of them recognized. They had no idea what that thing was. One of his friends said, "What do we do if it's a grizzly?" To that he replied, "No, there shouldn't be any bears in this park." They were all frightened, and they were just stood there staring at the mysterious creature in silence, and after a while the creature rose to its feet. They saw more of it at this stage. It was a huge bipedal ape-like creature with reddish-brown scraggly hair. It seemed to sense the presence of the three campers, and when it noticed it was being watched, it let out a startled roar or scream. It was at this point the three men discovered the stench that creature was capable of producing. The creature's cry was said to be intimidating enough to make those three turn tail and run for fear of their lives. They ran straight past their campsite and out of the park, never to return. This friend of mine knew that I loved the occult and anything to do with cryptids, so he wanted to share that with me. He said that the bestial stench that thing produced is something he feels he will never forget. Well, I looked it up as best I could, about cryptids in North America, but I couldn't find something like he describes. It kind of sounded like something called a skunk ape, maybe. I have no idea, actually. But hey, maybe it was that elusive Bigfoot. Anyway, I found it pretty interesting. Oh, it sounds like it's starting to rain, everybody. We better go inside. This happened when I went camping with my friend. The weather forecast told us that we were in for some delightful sunny weather, but when we got to the campsite, we could already see clouds forming by the evening. Eventually, we felt drops of rain, and before long, we were hiding from some very heavy rainfall. It was honestly terrible. We pitched our tent nearby a river, and the sound that the rain was making was so loud against the roof of the tent that we just had to get out of there and take shelter in a nearby tunnel. The tunnel looked like it was disused, or at least not too busy with traffic, so we thought that we would be fine to take shelter in there for a while. It felt like the trip was a total washout, if you can pardon the pun. I really regretted coming. My friend and I weren't even talking, and usually we are, unstoppably loud, and chatty girls whenever we get together. But the rain had dampened our spirits. I didn't want to be there, and I know that my friend was probably feeling the same. It was dark out, and thunder was beginning to rumble around us. All of a sudden, my friend piped up and said that she could sense somebody nearby. You know that feeling? We looked into the darkness of the tunnel but couldn't see anybody. My friend, she is the type to jump at her own shadow. She has a real nervous streak in her, and she is super sensitive to the slightest noise or disturbance. I tried to calm her down, but she kept saying that she could hear or sense something even though we were clearly the only people in the disused tunnel. She said that she heard voices, footsteps, and all sorts of other things. I was there too, and I could hear no such things. I was irritated that the camping trip turned out to be such a massive failure, and very annoyed that she wouldn't stop going on about hearing and sensing things. I don't like thinking of stuff like ghosts or creepy people out in the woods, so I try my best to avoid conversations like that. I really don't like getting scared. I tried to steer her away from trying to freak me out, but it didn't work. We ended up having a full-on argument out there in the rain. We didn't speak for a while, and this was even worse because there was a whole lot of night left, and now we were in silence. Plus it was getting darker and darker, and my anxiety was building. I kept thinking, what if there is something or someone out here with us? We were stood with our backs to one another, at either side of the tunnel, giving one another the space we needed to cool off. I couldn't take the silence anymore, so I said to my friend, without turning to face her, "I'm cold, aren't you?" And she replied in a very quiet, whisper-like voice, "Yes." I could tell by the lack of strength in her voice that she was likely still riled up and a bit scared. Our relationship kind of worked like this. I was the calm friend whose role it was to make peace and keep everything peaceful. I thought that it was probably time to assume that role. I started talking about other fun trips we had been on, to push away those frightening thoughts that we were both having. I mentioned the time that we went mountain hiking together, and how we both liked the same boy at the same time at high school, and how embarrassing that was. I realized that my anxiety had disappeared, and I even felt a little warmer now. I was really annoyed about the way the rain had ruined this trip for us. We had both been really looking forward to going camping together. I realized that I must have let my frustrations about the situation get the better of me, and I felt sorry about the way I had gotten so annoyed at my friend. So I said, "Sorry about earlier. I really flew off the handle there, and I shouldn't have done it. I shouldn't have taken it out on you. I was just scared and annoyed by the rain, I said something like that along those lines. I awaited a reply, but it never came. I apologized again, and then again, but I got nothing back. I guessed that she was still mad at me. I turned my thoughts to something else, and I quickly realized something. When we ran for shelter, I don't remember which way we came. Was it left or right? How did we get back to the campsite in pitch black? I hoped that she remembered, or we would have a fun walk in the rain to look forward to. I had to ask her, and she had to reply, annoyed or not. "Hey, there was a fork in the road before the tunnel. Do you remember that? Which way do we go if we want to get back to the campsite? Was it left? Was it right?" I heard a small voice respond, "Left." I thought, whoa, you got a great memory, and I used this opportunity to look over at her. I noticed that she had her headphones on. She was listening to music. I tapped her on the shoulder, and she gave a dissatisfied look as she took off her headphones and said, "What? How did you know that we have to take a left on the way back?" She said that she didn't know what the hell I was talking about. She said that she didn't even hear me ask about how to get back, let alone answer me. I wondered if she was joking, but the more I pushed her for a response, the more she doubled down, stating that she didn't know what I was talking about. Could it be true? When I thought about it, I felt a rush of blood rise to my head. It was terrifying. Someone other than my friend had just responded to my question. Not only that, but they had answered my earlier question about it being cold. Was someone in the tunnel with us? I turned around, slowly, and aimed the flashlight from my phone into the darkness of the tunnel. I couldn't see the end of the tunnel, but I'm pretty confident that there wasn't anyone there. I don't know who that voice belonged to, but whoever it was right. We turned left and we got back to camp. Who the hell was down there with us? It really scared me, and I demanded that we left the camp. There was no way that I'd be able to sleep with someone out here with us in the dark on a night of heavy rain. This happened when me and a bunch of friends went on a road trip out in the mountains. There were 10 of us in total. We had a pretty big friend group back in those days. We had plans to camp out deep in the mountainous woods. We got to the campsite in good time, set up and had ourselves a little drink next to the roaring campfire. And then we went to sleep without many issues. It was fun. We woke up in the early morning, most of us with sore heads due to the booze. The rain was way heavier than anticipated, and some of our friends were, shall we say, very poorly prepared for these conditions. A group of 5 had to drive out of the mountains and call it quits on the camping experience. I wasn't in that group, but I want to share what I heard from my friends who were. They went down the mountains through winding roads, some complaining of car sickness. You know what it's like. One of the girls in the car was staring out of the window, and something caught her eye. The car was full of chatter, and she had to cut through the noise to let them know what she had just seen. She was concerned, you see. She said that there was a woman stood still like a statue by the side of the road. And she said that the woman had her head bowed. It was still early in the morning, so you could forgive the others in the car for missing it, as the lights were still dim. And like with most mountains, there was a light mist after it had rained heavily. The rain hadn't fully let up yet either. It was still lingering. Our friend told the driver that she wanted him to stop and offer the woman a ride. It didn't seem like that much of an unreasonable request given the conditions. The others seemed a little apprehensive though. Before long, the car was pulling up alongside the woman, and the time had arrived for a decision to be made. As they pulled up on her, they realized that she was soaking wet, and concern inside the car grew for the unknown woman. They slowed to a stop by the woman, and she didn't appear to notice or acknowledge the car at all. Something was wrong. Even though the rain was coming down hard on her, she didn't even twitch or attempt to shelter herself. She doesn't look at the car, she just stares down at the ground with her head bowed. The car stopped a meter or so after the woman, and the driver reached to roll down the window, readying himself to offer the woman a ride. However, something made him put the pedal to the metal and drive out of there at full speed. The tires squealed as they sped off. Everyone in the car began to panic. No one but the driver knew what was going on. Some of the girls in the back started crying and the men started shouting. It was a whole thing. It was only when they got to the foot of the mountain did they arrive at a conclusion. The driver pulled into a convenience store's parking lot. The car, full of my friends, turned to the driver for an explanation. When they heard it, they said that they couldn't believe it, and I'm not sure if you will either. But hey, we got this far, didn't we? The driver said that as soon as the car was stationary, the drenched woman dropped to all fours in a sick kind of contortion and began to give chase to the car on her hands and feet. The driver saw all this in the rear view mirror, and that's why he had to step on it and get the hell out. He then went back on his statement. When he saw the confusion on my friends' faces, he said that oh, maybe the rain might have obscured my view or something. I don't know, maybe I was just seeing things. My friends, however, believed that he saw what he said he saw. There was an eerie, stilted silence in the car, which caused everyone to look over their shoulders and towards the back windows. I mean, I'm not sure what they saw, but I heard some stuff from America and other countries. Maybe that was something they call a skinwalker. I went hiking in the mountains when I was a student. I'm much older now, but this experience has stayed with me, so I felt like this was the perfect place to share it. I had a really strange experience in the mountains during the autumn. I had just joined a hiking society in college, and I was a fresher. I was joined by about 10 other students from other universities. I went to an all-woman university, and the club I joined was all male. They had traversed the mountains many times in the past. Some of them had a ton of experience that I did not. I thought that it would be great to make some friends and learn from these guys. I felt as if I could really rely on them in a sense. Well, we picked a great day to begin our hike. The weather was perfect. The pace wasn't too bad either. I expected to get left in their dust, but I was keeping up with them quite well. I was tired, sure, but keeping pace. We hiked for a few hours and then we got to the mountain. We had made plans to make our campsite and climb the mountain before the sun went down. We took a super short breather, and next we started our lunch. It was quite nice because we all pitched in, and before long our hungry bellies were full. I think everyone was happy with the pace of things and the distraction of dinner, so we kind of wandered off task, and I guess we were behind schedule. We got back on task after lunch, and we all got ready to climb the mountain, so we split up into two groups. I was in the second group, and I wasn't upset about that. I mean, I didn't want to be leading the climb. We planned on reaching the summit by about 3 p.m. We were supposed to have a break at the summit for about 30 minutes, but as soon as we started climbing, a thick layer of fog or mist began to descend. So we quit taking a break due to the low visibility brought on by the fog or mist. Yeah, thanks, fog/mist. The visibility got worse and worse, and before long the sun was hidden behind clouds and mist. It was making every step more and more difficult. After about an hour and a half, maybe it was about 4:45 or 5 p.m., it was impossible to walk without the aid of a flashlight. The problem for us was, experienced though I thought my new friends were, they didn't pack any flashlights, and neither did I. When we got to the summit, they still insisted on leaving early, but to be completely honest, I was exhausted. Like I said, I wasn't as experienced as these hikers. I really did need that breather. I told them I'd be following on right behind them. I thought I'd give myself a 30-second breather, you know. But that turned into 5 minutes, maybe even 10 minutes. I was heading down the mountain a little too late at that point. I couldn't hear or see them anymore. I shouldn't have done that. I got separated from my group. I assumed I could catch them because it was so dark, but I couldn't hear anyone's voices. I headed down the mountain in the general direction that I came from, and I guess I was making some progress on the descent, and that was when I saw something. There was a light shining off in the distance. The first thought that came to mind was, is someone in distress? Maybe someone had gone hiking alone on this dark autumn evening and gotten lost or stuck. I mean, it was easily done. It had just kinda happened to me. So I called out, but no response came. Maybe they couldn't hear me. I started to move towards that light. I wanted to find out if someone was hurt or not. I also wondered if it was someone from the group that had come to help me. I really hoped for the latter. As I got closer, I guessed that that light had been strategically set up for me to follow by someone from my group. So I breathed a sigh of relief and started walking towards the light. And then someone's voice shouted out to me. I guess it was one of the hikers in my group. "Don't go!" I stopped in my tracks. "It's that light. It's kind of weird, isn't it?" the guy said. I looked closer at the light and I thought something was wrong. It was sort of hovering and swinging from left to right. It moved up and down, and I know that doesn't sound like it's all that strange, but I have to tell you that I knew just by watching that light and the way it moved that it wasn't a human operating it. It wasn't a handheld torch. It was going up way too high for it to be handheld. I ignored the light and I kept going down the mountain in the direction I heard the voice come from, and before long I got to the bottom and I reached the campsite. I took a quick look back towards the mountain and I saw that light had already disappeared. I don't know what that was, but I feel like it was trying to lead me off the path I was on. Had I followed that light, I might not be here today. It was the strangest thing.